Before I launch into the message, I want to again thank you for being here or for watching and participating. I know you, as I said earlier, could be doing other things, but I'm glad you've chosen to participate in worship with us today. I am incredibly grateful that you decided to do so. So, I decided to take the mask off so that you could read my lips. Try not to get arrested for being a bank robber. So here we go. This is the fourth part of our series called Big Faith. Big Faith believes that God is who he claims to be, and that he will do everything he has promised to do. As we were singing just a few moments ago, I was reminded of all the things that Jesus did, his miracles. He always told people to do things they couldn't do in a synagogue. We're sad to service. Woman's paralyzed, bent over. Well, she's not paralyzed, but she's all bent over and she can't move. She can't stand up straight. Somebody said she had the world's best view of people's feet. And Jesus saw her and he told her, stand up. And she did. Another time he saw a man whose hand was all shriveled and paralyzed and he was unable to use it. And he said, stretch out your hand. The first thing he could have said was, are you crazy? I've never been able to move this hand. We talked about a man who was paralyzed and his friends brought him and laid him down in front of Jesus, lowered him through the roof and laid him down in front of Jesus. And Jesus says to this guy, pick up that mat and go home. If anything, I have come to the conclusion that God is always in the business of asking us to do things that are impossible. You have an attitude, he will say to us. Well, maybe he just says it to me. Okay, no, I know better. He says things to us like, you have an attitude that needs to change. You have a habit you need to break. There's a habit you need to start. And we're thinking, I can't do that. Any more than the paralyzed guy could pick up his mat and walk. But guess what happened? When he tried, it happened. See, big faith isn't a matter of size. It's not like what Jesus himself said it was. If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mulberry tree, go jump in a lake, and it will. Big faith is a big deal, though, to Jesus, because real faith, real trust in God was destroyed in the Garden of Eden. The snake, the enemy, the devil, Satan, came and told lies about us, about sin, and about God. Primarily about God. The rest of it just kind of falls in place. There was dishonesty. Because of his dishonesty, and our parents, or first parents' willingness, they trusted him and distrusted God. You either trust God or you don't trust God, right? So if you're trusting somebody besides God, you're not trusting God. That was their thing. And we've been following in their footsteps ever since. We believe lies about who God is and about who we are and who we can be. And we believe lies about what's right and what's wrong. And it leads to disobedience. So there was dishonesty, there was distrust, and it led to disobedience. We've all been doing what we think is right. And avoiding what we think is wrong. And just look at all the wonderful things we've achieved in this world. That was sarcasm, in case you're not sure. Because we have messed things up badly. But on the flip side, ever since our first parents did that, God has been in the work of restoring trust. restoring our trust in him. He's been working for that. He reveals the truth about himself in a variety of ways, but ultimately he revealed the truth about himself in Jesus. And in Jesus, we recognize the truth about who we are and who we could be. We recognize the truth about who God is and who he's promised to be. And we recognize the truth about sin, about what's really right and what's really wrong. And when we encounter him, we have the opportunity, and we give the right and the responsibility to trust him. See, when we begin to know the truth about who God is, we have the opportunity to trust him or to continue to believe the lies and distrust him. But when we trust him, when our response to the truth about who God is to trust him, there's this thing that the Spirit begins to do, to transform us as he teaches us. He transforms us from the inside out as he teaches us how to live the way God intended for us to live. And that's faith. It takes faith to do the impossible. Just so you know, this is what he tells us to do. The overall arching thing that he tells us to do that is impossible for us to do. If we think it's possible, then we're not quite believing the truth, because we're not understanding something. He tells us to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. In other words, love God with everything we are, no matter what the cost. And love our neighbors as ourselves. Even that one. Don't yab at me. It's not me anyway. Jesus is the one that said those were the two greatest commandments, and they're actually like the heads and the tails of a coin. You can't separate them. If you don't love your neighbor, you don't really love God. And you can't love your neighbor if you don't love God. There are 5 things that the Holy Spirit uses to grow big faith. There's practical teaching, providential relationships, private disciplines, personal ministry, and pivotal circumstances. Now, 2 of these things are essentially beyond our control. We talked about one of them previously, and that's that idea of providential relationships. God arranges and brings people into our lives for providential relationships, but you cannot start one. Remember, I said something along the lines, can you imagine someone coming up to you and saying something like this? Hi, I'm Mark, and I want to have a providential relationship with you. Yeah. That's spooky, to say the least. The other thing we have no control over is pivotal circumstances. Stuff happens in our world. Oh, you know what I mean? Like COVID-19 shows up in China and then spreads all over the world in a massive pandemic and messes everything up. That's a pivotal circumstance. What are you going to do in that circumstance? Well, that you have some abilities to respond in circumstances, but you can't just go out. You don't wake up one day and go, I am going to have a pivotal circumstance today. Well, you can, but it's kind of like waking up and saying, I'm going to be perfect today. Nothing's going to bother me today. I've never made it to breakfast with that. So there are 2 things we have no control over. We need to be open to providential relationships, and we need to know how and be ready to respond to pivotal circumstances. But there are 3 things that the Spirit uses to build our faith in Jesus that require us to take an active part. If we don't take an active part in these 3, if we don't do our part to make sure they happen, then they don't happen. The first is practical teaching, and that involves us making sure we receive practical teaching, and then that we practice the practical teachings, that we put them into practice. The second thing is personal ministry. God calls us to care for people and to infuse people with the hope of Jesus. That looks like different things to different people. But when we get involved in ministry of serving other people, it necessitates us growing, because it's one of those things. Another one of those times when Jesus told the disciples to do something they couldn't do. There was a whole crowd of people that had been following him, and they were hungry. It was nighttime, and there was, they're out in the, I don't know why. People were so happy to follow Jesus, they even followed him out into the desert. And there was no place to go to get food. There was no place to provide for them. And Jesus turns to the disciples, and they came to him and said, well, Lord, you need to send these people someone to go home. Tell them to go home so they get something to eat. And he goes, you feed them. Did he just say what I thought he said? The accountants. I love accountants. Accounting wears me down, but I appreciate it deeply, particularly the people who are really good at it and enjoy it. And the accountant in the group said, Lord, you do know that it would take nearly a year's wage to feed all these people. We don't have that kind of money. When you're in personal ministry, whether it's teaching a Bible school class or helping your children learn how to pray, or helping your neighbor know Jesus, any of these things, these are all ministry. They're all services. They're all things that Jesus say, you take care of them. And they're all impossible unless he works through us. But we have to do something. We also need to exercise the private disciplines that Jesus taught. Now, let's talk about discipline for a moment, because I'm pretty sure most of us do not have a positive feeling about the word discipline. Or maybe it's just me. I don't know. But just, how do you feel? Think about it. How do you feel about the word discipline? The dictionary does not help me. The dictionary does not help me feel good about discipline. It says discipline is the practice of training people to obey rules, using punishment to correct disobedience. It's not real something I just want to be disciplined. There's something wrong with the person who says that. I just want to be punished. Come on. It's not right, I'm telling you. Others define discipline as the ability to manage your actions, feelings, and emotions. An example of self-control, this dictionary went on to say, is when you want a cookie, but you use your willpower to avoid eating it. Yeah, none of us are really particularly fond of not eating cookie discipline. Not eating steak discipline. Give me the steak. Right? Discipline is not fun in the beginning. Discipline is not something we look forward to. Sacrificing what we want now to have something else later can be really frustrating for us. We don't like it. We don't like discipline. But in time, if we practice discipline, self-discipline, if we practice that, we begin to enjoy the benefits of being a disciplined person. If you don't eat the cookie, you won't want a glass of milk.